Well, hello, boys and girls, and where you at? We have reached that time in our previews. We are doing 32 of these, the 2023 NFL team previews here on bet.nola.com, powered by the Dattitude Podcast. This is number 11 of 32, and we have reached the Jimmy G portion of our NFL team previews. So exciting. The Las Vegas Raiders. Man, they're going to be so good this year, right? Come on, we don't want to be too down on them, and we certainly don't want to start down. So we're going to be happy, joy, because we're going to talk a little bit. Wait, how far back are we going to go here to talk about the Raiders? No, we're going to talk about this year. It's not going to be fun if you're a Raiders fan, but you probably ought to watch anyway. Time for the Las Vegas Raiders. And when they moved to Vegas, everything was going to be great for them. Allegiant Stadium, from everything I hear, is a beautiful place to play. A couple years ago, they just kind of snuck into those playoffs, almost beat the Bengals, and ended up going to the Super Bowl. What the hell happened last year? They finished 6-11, third in the AFC West, and fourth in the AFC West, and did not. No, third. The Broncos were 5-12. Forgot how bad they were. Did not make the playoffs. Look, there were plenty of expectations. Remember this time last year, we were talking about the Raiders and quarterback Derek Carr was entering his 9th season as a franchise quarterback. But this time was going to be different because Devontae Adams, his buddy from Fresno State, one of the league's top receivers, was going to Vegas. Darren Waller was there, Foster Moreau. It was great. Josh Jacobs was going to have a breakout season. Offensive line was better. Defense was on fire. Yeah. Didn't work out so well. Team limped out to a 2-7 start in 2022. Josh McDaniels, it was not going well for him getting started there in Las Vegas. And by the time they figured things out, they won 4 or 5. And Carr, for some unknown reason, got in the doghouse. And that was the start of the end. Well, it was toward the end of the season anyway, but upheaval in Las Vegas in the offseason. Josh Jacobs had an all-pro season. I mean, this team should have been way better than they were. The fact is the offense was inconsistent. I mean, the numbers on the screen tell you that they were better than average, but, I mean, it's at points they weren't. I mean, they scored 32, 29, and 38 points in weeks 4 through 7. They had a bye in there. And then they scored 0 against the Saints. And then they scored 20 the next 2 weeks after that against Jacksonville and Indianapolis. So, look, defense generally underperformed throughout much of the season. And as you can see right there, they ranked 28th overall in yards, and they were 26th in points allowed. Worse than that, in turnovers created, dead last. Dead last in the NFL. It's not going to cut it. So what did they do? They went out in the draft and got some good players that can contribute early on, but really where they got their players were in free agency. This team changes a lot. Jimmy Garoppolo and Josh McDaniels are back together. They are reunited. Garoppolo, most of you remember that he was a backup quarterback for Tom Brady in New England, actually got a season to play when Brady went down for the season. Went to San Francisco, made a name for himself. 3 years, $72.5 million. That's what happens when you don't get your first wish, Aaron Rodgers. You got to settle for a Jimmy G, and you give him $72.5 million. Josh Jacobs, we just talked about him, all-pro running back last year. He's holding out. What happens if they don't sign him? I mean, what happens if he decides, you know what, I'm just going to stick to my guns and I'm not going to play this year? Then they're stuck with Zamir White, who could be good. He had 170 yards last year. In fact, going into the season, a lot of people were talking about taking Zamir White as a handcuff in fantasy football. He might be a lot more than that this year, because if Jacobs doesn't sign, at this point in time, he's probably going to be the starting running back unless they can get one of these guys out in free agency. But they don't want to go sign him now because they know if they sign a Dalvin Cook or someone along those lines right now, then Josh Jacobs definitely isn't going to sign. They're kind of in a bad way on offense. They signed Jacoby Myers from New England, 3 years, $33 million. I mean, Jacoby Myers is a good player. Is he worth $11 million a year? I mean, we're talking about these running backs who aren't making $10 million. I mean, Saquon Barkley his franchise tag is going to give him $10.5 million. We're giving $11 million to Jacoby Myers. Where's this league going? But I digress. First pick of the draft, though, is defensive end Tyree Wilson of Texas Tech. Is he going to start right off the bat? I'm not sure. They actually have some depth on the outside, so I'm not sure of all the places that you pick from. Tyree Wilson's a great player, but do you really need another defensive end? They need so much more than that on defense. Actually, that's one of the last places I would have picked. That's kind of the strength of their defense, that 28th ranked defense. Seemed to be on the edges. But no, that's not the way they saw it, I guess. What needs to go right for this team to make the playoffs now before we get to the schedule? That would be just about everything. And that includes Josh Jacobs signing like tomorrow. It's not a good thing for an offense that's just not stable right now. I mean, everyone's got to love Devontae. You got to love Devontae Adams. I mean, he's a fantastic receiver. And he and Jimmy Garoppolo obviously are probably going to get on the same page very quickly. But it's got to scare the dickens out of you when you talk about there were no upgrades made to this offensive line whatsoever. They did not go out in free agency and get anyone that's going to come in and start on the offensive line. I guess you can see where this is going, but let's get to the schedule and talk about what we think for the Raiders. And at Denver and at Buffalo to start, that is no picnic. I mean, and look, the NFL didn't do this team any favors. They do have, for some unknown reason, I'm not sure why this team has 6 primetime games, but maybe the NFL thinks they're going to be good. 6 primetime games, 3 on a Monday night, including 1 on Christmas night. I don't get it at all. But anyway, 3 of the first 4 games, this could spell disaster. I mean, you could easily see this Raiders team opening up 0-4. This is the 5th toughest schedule, and it's showing why right off the bat. New England at home. I mean, I said 0-4. It might be 0-6. I mean, there's a path to 0-6 here for this Raiders team. Gets a little bit easier at Chicago, at Detroit. That's a lot of road games that get started. And then they have, they have 5 of their next 6 are at home. Well, that's weird. Never noticed it when I was putting the schedule together, but on November the 5th, Giants and Jets. Even if they win one of those, okay, whoopee. 2 of them are in prime time. Explain that to me again. At Miami on November the 19th, Kansas City. Oof, that is brutal. Then their bye week, which is super late, by the way, after it was super early last year. I don't know. Maybe the NFL really is ticked off the Raiders. I don't know. Minnesota and the Chargers rounds out the 5 out of 6 at home. And then they finish the season at Kansas City, at Indianapolis, and then home for Denver to wrap it up. Look, man, it's time to break the foil, and let's get to the prediction part of this show. Drum roll, please, as we like to say. Yeah, I think I'm being kind when I say 5-12. I'm going to explain these bets for you in just a minute, but you look down there, losing Waller and Morrow, and who did they go get? They went and got Austin Hooper from Tennessee. Whoop-de-doo. Getting safety Marcus Epps from Philadelphia. That's cool. But look, this schedule's brutal. I mean, it really is. It does not start well. It just sets this team to be in a spot where, I got to be honest, I wouldn't be surprised if Josh McDaniels is fired before the season's over. And I don't know that it's necessarily going to be his fault. He's kind of like being set up to fail. Just between what the Raiders did in the offseason and what this schedule has got coming up for them, it's not going to be a good season. It really isn't. And what you see here, I like to do a best bet, and I started to put the generic under on there, and I'm like, I cannot advocate the under. The under at Caesars Sportsbook is 7. And even if you go shopping around, I found 6.5 a lot of places, but the best I found it, the under 6.5 is -135. I don't like that. So here's what I propose to you. But at FanDuel, you can bet exact wins. 7, you see the numbers here. They're all like plus 650, 550, 500, or 600. Some, all these numbers. You bet exact wins. You bet them to win exactly 7. You bet them to win exactly 6. You bet them to win exactly 5. You bet them to win exactly 4. That means off of a $25 bet, you're going to win $125. You got to pay the other $75 that you lost, so you're going to be a profit of $50. So you bet $100 to win $50. But to me, that sure beats that. That's more value to me because you got 7, 6, 5, or 4. That's more value to me than trying to pay at Caesars. It's $185. You'd have to pay $185 to win 100. Or you'd have to pay, we'll see, my quick show math here, you'd have to bet, what, over $90 to win 50. Just not worth it. I'd rather do something like this where I think you have a better chance of profit. You don't, and if you hit the 7, it's not a push. Or if you bet it somewhere else and you bet the under 6.5, it's not a loss. I like this because this is where I think they're going to finish. If you're a Raiders fan, you're hoping I'm wrong. I don't see it. It'll be a rough year. You know who's not going to have a rough year? The Los Angeles Chargers. We're going to talk about them tomorrow.